Same dude, different day. Chapter 5. Why is my man acting single? Juggling the unholy trinity was a challenge, but based on my previous history, I was more than qualified to handle them. Isaac had yet to return from his trip, so that gave me many opportunities to come up with different magic tricks to perform on Courtney and Q. My ability to perform central abracadabra drove men crazy and left them wanting more. I had to tread softly though. Any uncalculated move on my part would result in my infatuation with them or their infatuation with me. Both scenarios were unfavorable. What started as a fun, stress free experience quickly turned into a smorgasbord of foolery. Although adding new teammates to my roster was somewhat satisfying, there was also a hint of uneasiness that came with it. Something deep down on the inside of me was off, but I didn't take the necessary important steps to evaluate myself or make the necessary adjustments. Doing so would have required me to address my issues and face them head on. Who had time for that level of adulting? Certainly not me. Something had to give though, because I often found myself repeatedly dating the same types of men that meant me no good. It appeared as though I had lost my identity somewhere along the drive from the Midwest to the dirty South. My recent promiscuous adventures, although pleasurable, were completely out of character for the person who I was on the inside. Often, I felt like I was having outer body experiences. Slowly but surely, I was taking on a new persona, both physically and mentally. My push-up bra and butt-enhancing shapewear were becoming a staple in my daily attire. The thought of lipo even crossed my mind a time or two, but my lack of funds threw a monkey wrench in that plan. However, I always managed to scrape up enough coins for hair, lashes, and nails. I probably would have bought some fake hips if they were sold at my local beauty supply store. Since I struggled so much with comparison, I would have done anything to become anyone other than myself. My desire to resemble the other Georgia peaches was dangerous and unhealthy. In addition to taking extreme measures to change my physical appearance, my mental health was plummeting as well. The same girl that was once a frequent churchgoer now made frequent trips to the liquor and condom aisle of the grocery store. Poor Jada. She had to watch me deteriorate right in front of her, but couldn't help because I would never fully open up to her about what was really bothering me. She never gave up on me, though. Jada picked out different church services for us to visit every Sunday in hopes of finding a church home. Sadly, our Atlanta church tour proved unsuccessful. There were really no churches that I was able to connect with. Had I fallen so far from glory that I was now unable to feel comfortable around other believers? Truthfully, my light was no longer shining brightly like theirs. Mine was kind of flickering like some of the street lights in the hood. My spiritual life was hanging on by a thread, but so was my personal life. There were several decisions that I needed guidance for. Should I stay in Atlanta or move back home? Which dude should I focus on, or should I just throw them all away? What type of job should I be applying for? Why didn't I feel comfortable in church anymore? All these dilemmas needed to be rectified as soon as possible. But making wise decisions was always a struggle for me because there was always a holy version whispering advice in my right ear, while the harlot version of me occupied the left. My inability to make sound decisions on my own caused me to search the scriptures for answers. One of my favorite scriptures is when Jesus turned that water into wine because y'all know alcohol hits different when it's free. But that story couldn't really help me find the answers to any of the questions that I needed to address. Note to self, ignoring the issue amplifies the problem. The Bible had always been a little difficult for me to understand, especially the King James Version, because who talks like that in real life? Although it was difficult to understand, the King James Version seemed to be the crowd favorite at the church I grew up in. It was the only version the pastor ever taught from. Therefore, I was always lost. So I started remixing the Bible stories to make them easier for me to understand. As I was flipping through the Bible trying to make some sense of the emotional tornado that had just swept through my life, I came across the story of the prodigal son. The story is in Luke chapter 15, verses 11 through 32, but I have to remix it for it to make sense, so here it goes. There was a man and he had two sons. The oldest son was a fun snatcher. He was a judgmental hater that never allowed himself to have a good time. Now that younger son was the complete opposite. He turned up every time he was outside. One day, the younger son's baby mama confronted him and was talking all type of stuff and was downplaying him for still living with his parents. So he asked his dad if he can get his inheritance and get out the way. The father knew that it was a bad idea. He knew his younger son didn't have no sense and that he was going to blow all his money. But he also knew that he couldn't live his life for him, so he went ahead and gave him his inheritance and told him to go on his way. As soon as the funds were deposited into the younger son's account, he moved to Atlanta because y'all know that's where everyone goes to get rid of their problems. He spent all of his money on dime bags, strippers, and dark liquor. After he realized that he couldn't even afford anything on the dollar menu, he headed back home. When his father received the text that he was on his way back home, he started planning a huge party to welcome him back home. This smooth pissed the older son off. He went in like, I've been here all this time. You ain't never gave me no party. But the young and the drunk goes off to Atlanta and splurges all his money, and you gonna have a party for him? Is that what we doing? So the father had to sit his older son down and check him real quick. Like, first of all, you don't run nothing around here. That's the first thing. Get that straight. Secondly, you could have had a party any day. All you had to do was ask, but you sitting up here being bitter and worrying about other people. Mind your business. Then he had to love on him a little bit. And he was like, look, I love you just as much as I love the other son. But I have to welcome him back home to let him know that no matter what he does, no matter how far he strays away from me, I always got his back. And I'll do the same for you too. After reading that story, I felt like God was trying to tell me that even though I had been ignoring him lately, he still loved me and would embrace me when I decided to come back. That scripture should have encouraged me to seek God and ask for forgiveness. Alternatively, I retreated and ran as far away from him as possible. The whole Xavier debacle still had me in my feelings. Why on earth would I run back to someone who allowed me to experience such heartache? The prodigal son returned home because it was better than his current situation. In my eyes, nothing could cure the humiliation associated with being Xavier's beard, not even God. So I continued to flee from him, and I settled in the land of the frauds and the home of the broken. Note to self, make sure he's really single. Once again, I ignored my feelings, hoping that one day they would all just disappear. Just when I thought things couldn't get any worse, I managed to stumble upon Tobias's engagement photos. They were plastered all over my social media newsfeed. The congratulations and the comments and the reposts and the numerous likes killed me softly as I continued to scroll. It seemed like every single time I logged onto that particular social media platform, I received news that would ruin my doggone day. Tobias's news was shocking, especially since it had only been a few short months since our last rendezvous. More importantly, I didn't even know he had a girlfriend. My character hadn't been angel-like, but I would never voluntarily sign up to be a homewrecker. Now, I knew he was very friendly with his genitals, so I expected him to have a roster, but I didn't know it would include a full-blown out girlfriend. Note to self, cheating is a character flaw. There are so many different type of relationships that this new generation of non-monogamists have created. If he knew he wasn't ready to settle down, why would he make a commitment to her? Suddenly, I realized that I judged him for doing the exact same thing that I had done in the past and was currently doing with Isaac. In the past, I showed my lack of commitment by emotionally cheating when I didn't get enough affection. Now I was entangled with 3 men, so I really needed to mind my business. However, I found myself being judgmental again, wondering if Tobias's fiance wasn't fulfilling his sexual needs, and that's why he was all up in your girl. But how unfair was I to blame the victim for getting cheated on? Cheaters are selfish individuals who lack the discipline and integrity to stay faithful. How dare I turn it around on her? The cheated shouldn't be held accountable for the cheater's character flaws. Now it's possible that the person who was cheated on might have said or done something that triggered their partner's insecurities, but it's still not a reason to be unfaithful. If Tobias wasn't satisfied in his relationship, he should have just left, just like I should have done when I lacked attention from my significant other. I was beginning to realize that we were the problems. There was something in us that was causing us to be unfaithful, but instead of dealing with our demons, we embraced them. Then we dragged innocent bystanders along for the ride. I kind of felt sorry for his fiance. I hoped that he would adjust his behavior now that she was engaged, but I wouldn't bet my life on it. Unfortunately, I was no better. If I ever hoped of having a chance at a functional relationship, I needed to stop getting myself caught up in these type of situations. Note to self, Stop catching feelings for people who are willing to fumble you. Isaac flew back to Atlanta the day after I found out about Tobias's secret life. He was a much needed distraction from all the drama that was going on. As soon as I picked him up from the airport, we fell right back into our lustful routine. We couldn't keep our hands off each other. Though I didn't want to admit it, I kind of missed him while he was gone. There was something about Isaac that fulfilled all my needs. When we were together, Isaac made me feel like the most significant person in the room. I felt so alive when I was around him. He was my heir and I needed him to survive. He wasn't the best looking man on earth, but what he lacked physically, he made up for mentally. He was also very affectionate and, most importantly, loyal. Well, at least I thought he was. Our love or lust or whatever you want to call it began to fizzle as fall approached. Feeling guilty, I reasoned that he may have found out that I was a tiny bit unfaithful while he was away on business. We weren't officially a couple, but I could understand how he would be upset. Most of my friends continued to believe that everything was still good between us, but the truth was he had been consistently dropping the ball. I threw him a slow, underhanded pitch, and he fumbled. Now I know I just referenced two completely different sports, but that precisely portrayed the characteristics of our relationship. We weren't on the same page about anything, and sometimes I even wondered if we were in the same book. Cuffing season was right around the corner, and he was right on schedule to start acting funny. I knew that this would happen, but it didn't make it hurt any less. The incident that pushed me over the edge was when his brother flew in from Jersey to hang out with him. He conveniently forgot to introduce me to his sibling that weekend, but managed to slide by my apartment at a disrespectful hour of the night for some private entertainment. As soon as he arrived to my place, I confronted him about not being good enough to meet his brother. But that mouth was a pleasurable weapon of mass destruction, and he used it to shut me right on up. Then he was nowhere to be found for like the next week. Convinced that he was no longer willing to put forth the effort, I grabbed my phone so that I can delete his number. He sent me a text just at the exact moment that I was about to erase him from my life. It was as if he knew I was about to move on, so he felt the need to troubleshoot the issue. Guys always seem to pop back up when they feel like their woman is slipping through their grasp. And it's so annoying. I knew that there was no use in trying to revive a relationship that had already died, but he wanted to talk things out. Communication was not my strong suit, especially when I knew the relationship was about to be over. Once again, I didn't ask for closure. It wasn't a real relationship anyway, so what was there to close? Plus, this time I had two backup plans to fall back on. Isaac tried to convince me that he missed me and wanted to talk in person, but I could tell it was all game. He just wanted me to smash him. We both knew it, but instead of being honest about it, he pretended that his only plan was to mend our broken situation. He refused to tell me the truth, and I refused to continue to give him my body. We were not in a real relationship, and the only way our situation would get better is if he changed our relationship status. The forbidden question, so what are we, fell out of my mouth, even though I already knew the answer. Isaac responded by giving me random examples of other couples that never had titles but still had strong connections. His rant equated to monuments of nothingness. Those people don't have anything to do with us, so I wasn't even sure why he brought them up. He never provided clarity on our future. Instead, he quickly changed the subject and rambled on about something completely unrelated. Yo, why you speaking in parables? You're not Jesus, bro. That was my response to his dissertation on our dysfunctional relationship, but he was completely unbothered by my verbal attacks. It was time for me to walk away, but I ended up staying in an unfavorable situation. Isaac's lack of effort soon overshadowed his promise to do better. Deep down, I knew he was no longer looking out for my best interests. We were falling apart, but my self-hatred allowed me to engage in his lackluster love continuously. Shortly after I accepted the fact that Isaac and my connection would never be the same, I kind of noticed on his social media that he seemed to be out on a date. And he was with his ex-girlfriend. He had mentioned her to me a couple of times, but I was never suspicious because he always downplayed her. Instead of brushing it off, I should have connected the dots and realized that since her name frequently came out of his mouth, she was constantly on his mind. Now that I knew the truth, I wasn't even really surprised that he had gotten back with his ex. It's a natural impulse to go back to your comfort zone, especially when your main squeeze stops giving it up. Note to self, sis, don't stalk that man. Most women have the gift of research. Their ability to analyze a person's social media and compile a list of names, dates, and addresses without even breaking a sweat always amazed me. Unfortunately, I never received that gift, so I accidentally exposed my lurking on his page with a double tap, and he, in return, blocked me. Wow, that's what we doing? I was devastated, but I was still prideful, so I shrugged it off and pretended like everything was fine. After my complicated relationship with Xavier, I promised myself that I would never get so engulfed in a man that I would lose myself again. I vowed never to put another man's feelings before my own, but there I was, yet again, sitting in a pile of tears, wondering who I was and why no one wanted me. Therefore, I had to convince myself that it needed to happen. I filled my head up with a bunch of scenarios of how things could have turned out and forced myself to believe that this outcome was the best one. Thanksgiving came and passed, and I didn't have a grateful bone in my body. My sense of abandonment seemed to overshadow the fact that I had food on my table and a roof over my head. Christmas was right around the corner, and I had no desire to celebrate our Savior's birth, nor did I have the money to participate in the season of giving. Perhaps going home to visit family for the holiday would have lifted my spirits. Unfortunately, my lack of funds was compromising my ability to escape life's woes. I didn't have two nickels to rub together, let alone enough money to purchase a trip back to the Midwest. And I couldn't ask my parents because they had already paid all of my fees associated with me being the maid of honor at my baby sister's wedding. The whole situation was so humiliating. I was beginning to regret having moved to Atlanta, blaming everyone except myself for my not so perfect circumstances. Christmas passed and it was now New Year's Eve. For some reason, I just couldn't get Isaac out of my mind. Several glasses of wine later, I had convinced myself that he was on the other side of town missing me too. He hadn't blocked my roommate from following him, so I used her phone to stalk him. I logged on hoping to see some sad post about how he had lost the love of his life and was thinking of a master plan to get me back. Instead, I saw him sipping cocktails from pineapples with umbrellas in them with his ex/new girlfriend on the beach. I threw that phone across the room. Her iPhone screen and my heart were now both shattered. Now I had to go further into debt to replace her screen, but there was no amount of money in the world that could replace my self-esteem. I was unhappy and bitter, and I wanted him to have a similar experience. He honestly wasn't even that cute, so I don't know why I was tripping. I guess I wasn't mad that I lost a person. It was what he represented that caused me to feel so much despair. He was confident and stable, all the things I wasn't. His absence represented my defeat. Since I was unable to keep such a well-rounded man, I felt like a failure. Again, I had been searching for acceptance, and when I finally thought I found it, it slipped right through my fingers. I was tired of not being good enough. The wine wasn't getting me where I needed to be as quick as I needed to get there, so I started taking shots of tequila. That didn't end well. The last thing I remember was throwing up in the bathtub. I guess my drunken brain couldn't comprehend that the toilet was only 1 foot to the left. When I finally arose from the dead the next day, Courtney was right beside me. The floor was sprinkled ever so irresponsibly with red Solo cups, condom wrappers, and whatever was left of my dignity. I guess he had received several unreadable texts from me that night, so he came over to check on me, but I was too drunk to notice. He stayed with me that night to make sure that I was okay. There's that protector thing that I like again. He was starting to become my go-to boo. No matter what happened, I knew he'd always be there. I hate that I was using him, but it was a mutually beneficial relationship. He understood me, and I never had to be alone.